A year ago, my life had collapsed around me. I'd worked myself into exhaustion. My father died suddenly, and my relationships were in turmoil. Little did I know at the time, out of my greatest despair was to come the greatest gift. I'd been given a glimpse of a great secret.
Okay, let me just begin by asking you to put a couple, priorities. We all have priorities in our lives, right? There are things that we think should come first and second and third and so on down the line. Well, within religious circles, there seems to be this trio of things that we talk about and that we wonder about a lot of times as far as what should be the priority within our lives. So I want you to, in your own mind, I don't want to hear from you, I don't want to raise a hand, I don't want nothing. I just want you to think about this in your own life and just remember this because we're going to be talking about it a little later today. Three things, these three things, put these in the order that you think that they should be in. Your family, God, and yourself. Okay, those three things, or however you want to list them: yourself, God, family, God, your God. Well, however you want to list that, you write those down, or remember what you think that your priorities are, or what they should be. Maybe not what they are, but what you think they should be within your life. Now, just keep that in mind because we're going to be talking about that later. So let me just welcome you to week number 2 of our brand new series called The Secret. And in this series, what we're talking about is actually the secret to happiness, which really isn't a secret at all. But our world a lot of times thinks, and especially our religious world, I think, rolled into all of that, seems to have the idea that God has somehow hidden this secret to happiness from us. He really doesn't want us to be happy, or maybe if he really does want us to be happy, he's kind of hidden it, and it's one of those things that you've got to be, really, really spiritual in order to discover, or you've got to do certain things in order to have that happen within your life, all those different kind of things. But so the question is God trying to hide this formula from us? If there's a formula, is God trying to hide that from us? Does he really want us to be happy? And if he does, is he trying to keep that from us or make us work for it, or whatever the case might be? We've been told probably all our lives that anything worthwhile you have to work for. It's going to cost you something. Well, I think that kind of we tend to take that idea with happiness as well. But it's my opinion that the lack of happiness within our lives has a lot to do with the fact that most of us have probably never been given permission to actually do what we know we should be doing, to actually take care of ourselves. Especially within religious circles, I don't think we're usually not given that piece of information. Usually that piece of information is said the opposite way. Instead of saying, we need to take care of ourselves, we need to slow down, we need to relax, we need to trust ourselves, we need to do what we know what we do best, all those different kind of things. Many of us have never been brought to an understanding of the fact that God can take the things within our lives, both the good things and the bad things, the things that we're good at, the things that we are, our personal abilities and as well as our limitations, to really help us to experience greater joy in the Spirit, as well as experiencing outward happiness within our lives. I don't know that any of us or many of us have actually been given that permission to really step back and take a look at those kinds of things within our lives. So as we begin, or before we begin, let me just say to you that we have a team of people here at GraceLife.tv and on the internet who support us on a regular monthly basis, that helps to keep this church going and keep the awesome message of grace and freedom in Jesus Christ going out throughout the world. So if you'd like to join that team of givers, we just would really appreciate that and could use that as well. So just pray about that. Think about what God might have you do in that area as well. We don't have just bills once a month or one month out of the year. It's one of those recurring things, So whatever you're able to give would be great. Last time we talked about the fact that God wants us to learn to slow down and relax a little bit. Even though we've been told the opposite probably within our lives, especially within religious circles, that we should be busy working for God. You know, if you want to be happy, you need to be busy working for God. You need to do more. You need to do more of these things and do more of that stuff and all those different kind of things. But in Psalms chapter 46 and verse 10, God simply says, straightforward, cease striving. You know, quit trying so hard, you know. Be like if your children were trying to make you love them, you know. You'd kind of make you feel bad. You know, you really wouldn't want that to happen. You want them to love you just for who you are and what you are and you know, those kind of things. So God says, cease striving. Know that I am God. I'm the one who's God here, not you. I'll be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. So God says, listen, I can take care of myself. And I love you just for who you are. You don't need to try to work for that love. You don't need to try to, you know, do more in order to gain my love, all those different kind of things. But, you know, in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 34, Jesus gives this same kind of counsel when he says, don't worry about tomorrow. It will take care of itself. You have enough to worry about today. Well, I'd guess so, don't we? Today has enough worry of its own. We don't need to borrow anything from tomorrow, even though I'm really good at that. I mean, I'm really good at that. I can worry about stuff that hasn't happened yet without any problem at all. I worry about tomorrow and the next week and the next year and all those different kind of things. I'm really good at that. But Jesus says, listen, don't do that. It's not worth it. You know, it just stresses you out, shortens your lifespan, all those different kind of things. And we just need to learn to just take each day and the worries that come with each day, just as they are. So today we're going to be talking about safety third. Safety third. Check this out.
You know what that guy knows? Well, actually, he knows a great deal, but what he really knows is the importance of safety. You look around a place like this, you see it everywhere. Look at the sign up there. As if there could be any doubt. Safety first. Always, 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 over and over and over. But you want to hear the dirty truth? Safety is not really ever first. Safety generally, as best I can figure, is third. The reason I believe safety should be third is that it's so important, you can't really put it at number one. Because if you put it at number one and say it over and over and over again, you start to get complacent. And this is what's happened to me over the last 4 or 5 years. I've broken fingers, fractured toes, and cracked ribs, and fused my own contact lenses to my eyes once. And every single time I've hurt myself, it's always been in that fraction of a moment where I take my eye off the ball and I start to think that maybe somebody somewhere cares more about my well-being than me. It is always a mistake to let that happen. And the more banners you see reminding you of how important safety is, for me anyway, the more complacent I become. So, on the Dirty Jobs crew, we started to say safety third, just to remind you that ultimately it was on you. I'll tell you a story. About 3 years ago, maybe 4, I was on a crab boat called the Bountiful up in the Bering Sea, fishing for king crabs with those lunatics up there, right? And we were about 200 miles off the coast of Russia. The wind was blowing about 40. The seas were easily 35 feet. And the crew was out there working, and I was out there with them, you know, trying not to get killed. And I went up on a stack of crab pots that were stacked on the back of the boat, and I was helping unlash them, and I was scared-less. I mean, very, very frightening. And eventually I just couldn't take it anymore. I scrambled down off the pots, down on the deck, and I went up to the wheelhouse. And I went in, and the captain is hunched over the wheel. He's like, he's doing his thing, and the green water's coming over the bow, and it's just so ridiculously hazardous. I looked at him and I said, Cap, OSHA? And he looks at me and says, OSHA. Ocean. And we had a little laugh. And I'm like, no, seriously, I've been all over your boat. I don't see any signs about safety. I don't see any special guards or rails or, I mean, what's going on here? And he said, son, I'm the captain of a crab boat. My job is not to get you home alive. My job is to get you home rich. You want to come home alive? That's on you. I got it. In that moment, I got it. Nobody was looking out for me other than me. I spent every second on that boat grabbing on to every single thing I could and not letting go. I put safety first, second, third, fourth, all the way down the list. I never took my eye off it. So, it's not that we don't think safety is the most important thing. It's just that when you keep saying it's first, you got to wonder where everything else falls into place. Don't be that guy. Be careful. Safety third. Always in the top 5, eh? That's the dirty truth.
Hey. Okay, good. All right, I can see you all are thinking. So the first thing I want to say to you today is that God says we need to buy back the time that we do have. And by getting the downtime that we need, I think is what he's talking about here. He's not talking about working harder for God, even though we've been taught that. I think he's saying, listen, we need to get the downtime that we need in order to take care of ourselves and to get the stresses out of our lives, because life is full of stresses and stressors, isn't it? I mean, everywhere you turn, there's more stress of one kind or another. And I don't care who you are. I don't care how much it looks like your life is just, how much people look at you and say, oh, you got it easy, or whatever the case might be. Everybody has stresses and stressors in our lives, and life is stressful. That's just the way it is. And whenever we get down, whenever our stress gets too high, then we get to be where we're not worth anything to anybody. It drags us down over time, and we become ineffective and unproductive to our friends and our neighbors and our family and even to God. So, in a study conducted on stress levels at Harvard University revealed that, let me read this to you. Stopping just 4 times a day for 5 minutes at a time can slash your stress levels by 50%. It reminds your body that it feels like what it feels like not to be on adrenaline overload. This helps take you out of the automatic pilot, so you start acting instead of simply reacting to your life. Okay? Saying slow down, take a few minutes here and there to just relax and to remember what it's like to be able to relax, because life is full of stress. Now, is that really okay? I mean, here we are in church, right, or what we call church. We're in a church building. You all are the church. That's what the Bible tells us. That's what God says. Is it okay to think of yourself? I mean, saying no to others so that we can get the downtime that we need. Isn't that somehow a sin? If somebody needs you for some reason, or needs your help, is it okay to say no once in a while? Isn't the godly thing to do to always put others ahead of yourself? That's probably what we've been taught. It's always best, it's always the godly thing to put others ahead of yourself. The fact is, in the religious world, preachers are some of the worst offenders. That's fact. Preachers are some of the worst offenders as far as working so hard for God that they end up having little or no time left for themselves, much less for their own family. And as any experienced pastor will tell you, it's just simply not worth it. It's just not worth it. To work yourself in the ground for God and to leave your family out or yourself out or any of those kind of things, it ain't worth it. All it does is bring you down and cause you to be more stressed out, and other people pay for it as well as yourself. As a matter of fact, burnout among ministers is a much greater problem than most of us care to imagine or care to admit. According to recent research, 1,500 pastors leave the ministry each month due to moral failure, spiritual burnout, or contention in their churches. 50% of pastors' marriages will end in divorce. 50% of pastors are so discouraged that they would leave the ministry if they could, except they don't have any other way to make a living. That's pretty high percentages, isn't it? That's pretty high. And the rest of you all ain't much better. Because statistics show us that most of us generally fill up our lives by choice. We fill up our lives with all kinds of other responsibilities and obligations on the job, around the house, at church, and even to the neglect of the most important things in our lives, the most important people in our lives, including ourselves. We neglect all of those things that are important for us not to neglect. So let me draw your attention today to a verse in the Bible that one of those passages in the Bible that's very often used against us, I think, in religious circles especially, as a pry bar of condemnation instead of building us up and helping us to understand what God is trying to tell us. Instead of making us stronger, more victorious in life, a lot of times it's used against us as a pry bar to make us work harder for God and to do more for God within the church setting. It's found in 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8. And Paul writes to Timothy and he says, But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. I can't think King James says infidel. I never have liked that word. I'm not even really positively sure what it means, but unbeliever is really what the word is. That doesn't provide for his own, he's especially for those of his own household, he has denied the faith and worse than an unbeliever. Okay. So let me ask you a question right here. Does it look like Paul is being a little bit redundant to you, or is it just me? When he says if you don't care for your own what? Well, your own family, your own people, your own household. And then he turns around and he said, especially those of your own household. Well, I know you've already been taught, and so was I, that what this is really talking about is caring for his own means your extended family, your parents, your grandparents, whatever, the friends, maybe even friends and neighbors and those kind of things. And then more specifically, your own particular specific family, your little family unit, husband, wife, kids, whatever there is, might be there. We've been taught that. We've been told that. We believe that, or at least I'll say we. I'll put myself in that category. I was always taught that that's what that meant, is that you care for your extended family. That's important. And especially those of your own household, those who live under your roof, whoever they might be, whether they're adopted or just living with you, or whether those are the people you take care of first of all or next. And if you don't care for your family, then you're worse than an unbeliever. So that's what I've been told. That's what I think a lot of the religious world teaches us today about this particular passage. But the fact is, after studying this passage in greater detail, I came to some kind of interesting discoveries. Some things that I didn't think I would find there, some things that were kind of interesting to me. I found some things that seemed a little bit strange to me at first, as a matter of fact. The first and somewhat less surprising discovery that I made is that, of course, the original Greek word that's used, translated as provide in the English, is a word that literally means to take care of or take thought for, okay? Well, that makes sense, to provide. That's kind of what provide means, to take care of or to be thoughtful of, to watch out for, all those different kind of things. So to take care of or to take thought for, to care for a thing, your family, that's good. I understand that. So Timothy said if somebody doesn't take care of his own family or his household, he's worse than an unbeliever. The next question I have, though, is what does he mean by his own? Again, I think that many of us have been taught, I've been taught, that's talking about, since he defines later your own household, we've been taught that he means your extended family. Your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, that those people are most important in your life, those kind of things. However, what I found is, and this was a really interesting discovery for me at least, is that the original Greek word that's used here for own in this first phrase is the word, the Greek word idios, I-D-I-O-S, E-I-E-I-O, of course. And I'm not sure I like that word, idios or idios. It doesn't sound too good, does it? I mean, it's kind of like, well, you idiot. I don't think that's not what it's talking about here. But that word idios literally speaks of, and now get this, what that word really means when it says his own, it means literally your own self. You ever heard that before? I hadn't. It means your own self. Now, I like that. I like your own self. That's a Festusism. You know who Festus is, right? From Gunsmoke? Yeah, I call it a Festusism because Festus always got his own way of saying things, and that's one of the things I've heard him say a lot, is your own self. Well, it really is a fairly common phrase, I guess. As a matter of fact, in the Greek lexicon I looked in, it said one's own self. That's what that word means, that first phrase there. If one does not care for his own, it means one's own self. That seems a little bit crazy to me. Seems a little bit odd, One's own self, as in you, yourself, personally, That's what he's talking about. That's what that word really means. Now, I think that's a good thing. And the reason I think that's a good thing is because, idios seems to indicate, this Greek word seems to indicate a meaning that it's much deeper and more emphatic than simply saying yourself. Now, he could have said, take care of yourself. If you don't care for yourself, but it's more emphatic than that. It's a deeper meaning than that. And what I mean by that is it's be kind of like the difference between saying to someone, do it yourself, or saying, you do it. There's a difference there, isn't there? So I would say to you, well, do it yourself. Well, that's kind of a little less on the scale of emphasis. But if I say, you do it, I'm more like giving an order. There's a difference there, and that's the difference in this word. Rather than simply saying your own self or take care of yourself, he's saying, listen, this is important. Take care of your own self, right? So when Paul says, if anyone does not provide for his own, he's speaking directly and specifically of you taking care of you, your own self first. That's what he's talking about. So I began by asking you to put those three things in whatever order you thought that they should be in. Yourself, God, your family, whatever order you want to put those things in, right? So do you remember the order you put them in? Do you remember the order maybe you've been taught and you think that they should be? Well, Paul seems to indicate that we should care for ourselves first of all. He says that's probably most important, is to take care of our own personal needs and those kind of things above everything and everyone else. Now I can hear you saying in your own mind, and as I did, well, I thought we should be putting God first, right? I thought we should be putting God first. He should come first in our lives. I mean, if Paul says that you need to think of yourself first, then where does God fit into this picture? Because he says your own self, and then he says it's your own household, and God doesn't even seem to be mentioned there. Well, is God in this picture or is he not? Right? That's the question I want to ask. Well, I think yes, of course God should be put first. And I think that's exactly his point here, believe it or not. I think it's kind of a given, kind of one of those things that we may not have necessarily thought about in that sense of the word. But a person who truly cares for his own self, an individual that truly cares for their own self, a person who is truly interested in living a life to its fullest, literally being our happiest self in life, will absolutely put God first. Will absolutely put God first at the top of the list. Because, listen, as I've told you many times, the Lord is a warrior. He's already paid the penalty for our sins, and taken care of all those kind of things. He's literally defeated the enemy of sin and of death so that we might live as being truly free. And in Galatians 5:1, Paul says, he says that God has made us free so that we can be free. It was for freedom that Christ has made us free, so that we can be free, right? So what Paul is saying here is that I think what he's telling us, our list should look like this, that God is first, ourself is second, or if you want to say it the other way, ourself is first, which means we put God first, and our family comes after that. Okay. Now remember, we're talking about safety third. Okay? Remember, we're talking about safety third. Because we've been told so many times over and over and over and over and over again that, either our family should come first or God should come first or however you want to say that. And I think that what Paul is saying here is, in a sense, family third or family first. Just like the safety first thing, we've been told so many times that we've learned to ignore the whole thing. We've been told the same thing over and over and over again. It's on every sign that we come to. It's every place we go. But in the second phrase, he says, and especially for those of our own household. Meaning that after you've taken care of your own self, which means putting God first in your life, that then you will not only be healthy enough and whole enough to take care of your family, which will by default which means that by default we will see them as needing and requiring our protection and our care. I hope I'm making sense. As a matter of fact, I think so important is this progression that this God first, or yourself first, which means you put God first, and then the family third, that Paul goes on to say, now listen carefully, he said if we get this progression out of order, that we'll become worse than those who don't even claim to know Jesus. That's pretty strong, isn't it? That seems like some pretty strong language. Now, I think that what he's doing here is that he's placing these things in this order and saying, listen, safety third, that there is a priority here. That certainly God comes first, yourself comes second, but then he says, family, well, of course, if you put God first in your life by putting yourself first, which means God is at the head, then by default your family is what becomes one of those most important things in your life. It's like he said a few minutes ago, when he saw that safety third, that listen, you're there to take care of yourself, you begin to realize, listen, if I don't take care of my family, who will? And we come to that realization because we put ourselves at the top of the heap, which means we put God above us. And once we do that and we get our priorities straightened out, then we understand, by default we know, listen, my family is the most important thing in my life. Okay. You say, well, so how many of you have ever stopped to wonder what he might be referring to here when he says that, what's worse than an unbeliever? What could he be talking about that's worse than somebody who doesn't even claim to know Jesus? Right? God first, okay, yourself first, because God is over you. Your family comes under that, and you go, yes, my family is most important in my life because, God is here. What could be worse than somebody who doesn't even claim to know Jesus, doesn't even claim to be a believer at all? Well, Jesus was often, the times that Jesus was most often upset with people was with the Pharisees. And he was always upset with them because he called them hypocrites, right? People who claimed to be one way but were something else. People who claimed to be believers, followers of God, and yet treated themselves at the top of the heap. They said they were putting God first, but when it came down to it, they were putting themselves first. And God was in the picture, certainly, but you know what? They'd stand on the street corners and they'd pray aloud so everybody would pat them on the back and say what wonderful Christians they were, what God-fearing people where they were. And Jesus always had some of the most scathing words that Jesus ever spoke were to the Pharisees, and he called them hypocrites, whitewashed tombs full of dead men's bones. That's probably about as close to cussing as Jesus ever got. But man, I'll tell you what, he said it straight out. He didn't mince any words, right? So what Paul is telling us here is the same kind of a thing, that we're worse than an unbeliever if we get this order out of this progression out of order. Is that we become this hypocrite that says, oh, I got everything straightened out, everything's cool in my life, but if God ain't first, or putting yourself first so that God is up here, and then from there on you realize and you understand that family is the most important thing in your life because God is here. He is the controller. You look to Him for everything. You yield yourself to the Holy Spirit to allow Him to work through you, and the family naturally. Then in our physical world, family is our own household is most important. That's the ones we want to take care of. So we say, well, you know what? I've never been told that before. Well, that's cool. I haven't either. But, I've never been told to take care of myself before. But you know what? Why not? Well, Well, Jesus didn't. He was always working for everybody else. He was always busy. He's always giving himself over and over and over again to people. Oh, really? How many times in the Bible does it say that Jesus sent the crowds away and he went away alone to the mountain to be by himself, alone? Right? How many times does it say he sent the disciples away and he went out into a boat by himself? Over and over and over again it tells us that he early in the morning he took off by himself to be alone for a while. Why? Because he needed to take care of himself if he was going to be any good to anybody else, right? So I would agree that, like almost every other truth in the Bible, the concept of taking care of me first can and is abused and misused by those who want to, make the Bible work for them, for selfish gain. I also believe that, like all other biblical truths, I don't think that we dare ignore this one. That within that progression, and you can decide however you want to say that, but your own body and your own spirit will be much healthier and much happier, and your own family will thank you if you put yourself first by putting God first in your life. Because once we put ourselves first by putting God first in our lives, then everything else falls into place under that, which is, as Paul says, safety third. Who else is going to take care of your family if you don't? Safety third. In a sense, then, he's almost saying your family's at the top of the heap. But not really. Because really, it's like Mike Rose said. Listen, nobody else is going to. Nobody else is going to. Nobody else can put God first in your life. Only you can. And once you do that, then certainly family follows first under that. But if anyone does not provide for his own self, and especially for those of his own household, he's denied the faith and he has become worse than unbelievers. Nothing but a hypocrite, pretending to be what something he is not. Listen, God's awesome. Lord is a warrior, and he wants us to be warriors in this world. And the way to be warriors then is to follow the leader. And the leader is Jesus Christ, who has already taken care of all that stuff for us so that we can live as free people. The freedom to be free and to follow him and to do what we know that we should be doing. Lord bless you all.